Hello, everyone. My name is Deborah Harlow, and I have the privilege to be here with Monique Wells, who is the founder and CEO of the Wells International Foundation. And I really wanted to pick her brain and get to know her even deeper than I already do, because I think it's really important to understand what makes somebody tick when they decide to create something grand. Because each of us has the potential to go out there and do something great in the world. And a lot of times we don't feel like we have the capacity, or our background maybe doesn't feel like it set us up to be able to take such a big step in this world. So I think one of the most powerful ways to know what we are capable of is hearing the stories of others to know what they were capable of. And Monique is a very capable woman. This woman has done a lot, and she continues to do a lot. And every time she drops a little seed about her background, I'm like, wait, you did that too? So I wanted to be able to capture this on video and share it with the world so people could get to know her better and understand why she's so passionate about making the world a better place. And so she graciously said yes, that she would join me on this bright sunny day and answer some questions and fill us in on her background. So that is why we are here today. So thank you for joining me, Monique.
Thank you for asking me, Deb. It is a very, very big pleasure for me to do this with you. And actually, it's sunny in Paris as well.
Oh.
So that's pretty odd for this time of year. So I'm celebrating that in and of itself, as well as celebrating this time with you.
Oh, I love it. Well, if you are watching this and you don't know as much information as we do about WIF, I want to bring you up to speed on that. The Wells International Foundation, affectionately known as WIF, is a United States nonprofit organization that provides a number of multifaceted programs. And we have activities and projects that target the following areas. We call them our focus areas: life balance and productivity for women worldwide, with an emphasis on entrepreneurs; training in preclinical safety issues, pathology, toxology, lab animal sciences, and management; STEAM, one of my personal favorites, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics for girls and young women in the U.S., with a focus on African Americans and life sciences; travel abroad for students in the United States, something I'm hugely passionate about, so I love that we do that; art, with a focus on the provision of opportunities for students of the visual, culinary, and performing arts to study abroad, as well as the provision of opportunities for art history scholars to study the life and work of artist Buford Delaney and other American artists. And last but certainly not least, because this one is very near and dear to my heart, reading and literacy for African American youth, particularly at the K grade 3 through grade 3 level. That sounds like a lot of focused areas, and it is. I can tell you daily we're always noodling on ways to be able to cover them. And there really is a beautiful through line in all of them. And it's, for me, a huge honor and privilege to be part of the team. So the work that WIF does is phenomenal, and I applaud you, Monique, for what you've created.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I'm going to dive on in because I want everybody to know how phenomenal you are and what your story is. So I know that often some of the biggest challenges lead to the biggest rewards in life. You know, in the coaching world, they'll say your biggest breakdown was the birth of your biggest breakthrough. And it's painful, but it's true.
Yes.
It'd be nice to say that we could learn without having to skin our knees. However, that's not often how the world works. So I'm curious.
You break a few bones.
Exactly. And I've done that. And I've had some powerful lessons come through of it. So when you think about your life and your journey and taking that massive leap of faith to create a nonprofit, to create the Wells International Foundation, which hurdles did you personally face and how did you overcome them?
Well, okay. The first, and I guess the most important hurdle, was to really understand that the impetus behind me starting the nonprofit, multifaceted, but one of the most important ones was that my business, which was a consulting firm, a consulting service in preclinical safety. I'm a veterinary pathologist and toxicologist. One of our strategic focus areas is in there. I had a really, really thriving business, and the recession killed it. I mean, it literally killed it. Every single one of my clients went away. And I'm left thinking, okay, what to do. So pull yourself up. I have these skills. I can offer service to my industry, which I did. That service was to train people in time management, what I was then calling time management. That's a very corporate idea. Um, and it went well, as what often happens to me. Um, some people might say it's beginner's luck or whatever, but I started this training program, and it really went well. It went well for the first couple of years, but it was never my intention to do that forever. I thought that the industry and my business would come back, and it really didn't. It didn't for a long time. The industry did not come back for a long time. And so I finally figured out, okay, this work that I'm doing is actually, I'm less able to do it because as the recession deepened for my industry, people stopped paying for training.
Mm.
And so then I'm like, okay, well, I've got this skill, and it's really a quote unquote genius zone of mine. Who can I offer this to? Because this is what I need to be doing right now in order to support the household. So I decided to enlarge my audience to women working alone, women working at home, people like me. That was just exactly who I was and who I am. But the kicker was that no longer was there the know, like, and trust factor. I was just one in a sea of a zillion people, and not truly having the business acumen and everything that is required for a startup entrepreneur to, have as a base. And I was just swimming in it, and I was devastated. My self-esteem was like, okay, what are you doing? Who are you anymore, even?
Mm.
Because you're not doing this work that you're so passionate about. You found something else to do, but you never really intended to do that for too long. And I know this is a very long and roundabout way, but it's important to the story. So um, I had to remake myself,
Mm.
really. And what happened was that in 2012, I was given an award by an organization called Powerful Women International, and I went to New York. I went to San Francisco to collect it. And um, at that event, I met a woman named Sharita Herring, who was she was like a nonprofit evangelist. She was just everything that you could ever do. She's like, well, you could do that with a nonprofit. You could do that with a nonprofit. And we had dinner together, several of us, and she was just going on and on about it. And she was actually running for council person in Los Angeles at that time, based on, you need to start a nonprofit.
That better be on her business cards, because clearly that's her calling.
And she was eloquent, she was passionate, and you could not help but listen. And I thought, all right, I need to pay attention to this. I said to myself, it really sounds like it's too good to be true, but I'm just gonna store this information, and maybe at some point in the future I will use it. So that's always running in the back of my mind, and this is well after the recession has started. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm in need of something because I'm
Mm-hmm.
really feeling like, okay, what am I doing here? I'm treading water, and you and I, about what I lovingly call the Wonder Woman syndrome.
I have no
And I
idea what
was,
that is. Clearly
it
we.
was, it was something that I was teaching as a time management coach, productivity coach, and mentor. That the Wonder Woman syndrome is a syndrome where you believe that you're supposed to do everything by yourself. You're not supposed to need any help, and you're supposed to get everything right the first time.
Mm-hmm.
That's who Wonder Woman is. That's the negative side of Wonder Woman. And so there's obviously great positive sides of Wonder Woman, but this is the negative side of Wonder Woman, and you need to shed this side. So I was always telling people, okay, so I've tried to put my Wonder Woman in the closet, and just keep that door shut. And she's banging on it sometimes, but I've learned that this is not the way, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a tangent, and I'm not sure why I went down that road. But
I think it's important to remember when you're taking on some big decisions in life, you can feel like you need to do them alone. And I can't imagine a bigger decision than launching a nonprofit to help fix the world.
yeah,
That into itself, that decision is a Wonder Woman decision.
true. And so I'm thinking I'm really passionate now about serving this community of these women who are working alone. These are solopreneurs, we would call them. Subcategories: mompreneur, a mother, and often a single mother who's working alone, trying to support a household, and passionate about X, Y, or Z, but not really having the business acumen and just not knowing where to turn. So this is one of those things that I needed that, and I stepped up and I got the training that I needed for that. I'm like, but so many people don't know how to get that training. They don't understand. They just need some processes and things. And so I was building a business around that. At the same time, and on a very different track, so I have a lot of parallel tracks in my life. My husband and I have a travel planning service called Discover Paris. And we, over the years, developed a very strong following and a very strong business interest in the African American experience in Paris and the larger African diaspora experience in Paris. And through all of that, I came across a story of an artist named Buford Delaney, who was born in Knoxville, Tennessee, lived for a good, well, he moved from Knoxville to Boston, then to New York, then he moved to Paris, and he spent the last 26 years of his life in Paris. And he died a pauper. He died after 4 years in a mental hospital, and he was buried in an unmarked grave outside of Paris. And I was writing an article about African American grave sites in and around Paris, and I came across his story. That incited me, without all the gory details, incited me to found a French nonprofit to raise money to place a stone at his unmarked grave. Okay. And I thought when I had done that, okay, mission accomplished. Don't need to. I started to blog about him to raise awareness of the story and to lend credibility to the fundraising process. And when we succeeded, and we succeeded in less than a year, I said, okay, I'm done with Buford Delaney. I mean, a great story, but we're done. But there was something about him, his life, his persona, his spirit, that would not leave me alone. And I took up my blog again after about 3 months and continued to write about his story. And decided after a few years that what I needed to do to honor this man truly was to do a show of his work in Paris. And that was the impetus to found the U.S. nonprofit, the Wells International Foundation, because I needed money, and I didn't need just a couple of $1,000s. I needed lots of money to do this show, and because he was an artist from America, from the United States, and because his following is much bigger there, even though it's not the biggest following, it's a decent following, but he's not a household name. But the people who were going to give to make this show happen were and are American. And so I needed a vehicle to raise the money and allow people who would donate to receive a tax benefit and all of that. So I founded the U.S. nonprofit. So I pulled all of that information from the back of my head to the front. And I had already pulled it to the front a little bit because I had founded the French nonprofit.
Right.
But it's like, okay, that worked. So let's just go whole hog and let's do the U.S. nonprofit and let's raise the money to do this show. And that was the beginning of the Wells International Foundation. So that's a long story, but it's, those elements are really important. And when I decided to do the U.S. nonprofit, I called up Sharita Herring and I said, Sharita, All right. You're coming to the fore again. Help me with this. And she said, okay, we'll do it. She said, one of my claims to fame is that I can get nonprofit status for U.S. nonprofits through the IRS. I can get that document through the IRS, and I can get it approved in record time. And that's what I needed. So, I don't know. It's been a while now. We're 3 years old now. Things might have changed a bit. But when I was applying for nonprofit status, the average time for approval was between 1 and 2 years.
Mm.
The IRS, and Sharita got our paperwork done and approved in 17 days.
Woo! That is some fast math.
Yeah, but that's because she knows
Right.
what the IRS wants. And it was just the perfect example of what I want to bring to women entrepreneurs.
Mm.
If you just know what you need to do, instead of trying to figure it all out by yourself and trial and error. There's nothing wrong with trial and error, and there's trial and error regardless. Even if you know what you're doing, there's still
Yes.
trial and error. But there's a small trial and error, and there's a big trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing you really need to do is to find somebody who has done it before, knows what they're doing, has a track record, and say, help me do this. And don't be afraid to pay them to do it.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I love that. Two of the most powerful things that I heard you say about your journey is, number one, just being open to what's possible. You never once said in your story, oh yeah, when I was a little girl, I knew I was going to grow up and create a nonprofit, right? It was never in the story.
Never.
However, when we are open to what's possible and we see our own potential and we see how things connect, the right people will show up at the right time. And I'm a true, firm believer in when you are open, you can see things that maybe you wouldn't possibly before, or you wouldn't hear the message you were meant to hear when Sharita was talking to you. You'd be like, that's great for you. I don't know why you're telling me. I'm over here in preclinical, or I'm over here in coaching, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a really powerful takeaway that I heard from what you said, is being open at all times, because when it's meant to present, it will.
Yes.
And the other thing is when you said learning from others, so you don't know what you don't know, so make sure that you're going to have somebody else guide you, because even when you know what you need to know, you're still going to do some trial and error. What is so powerful about that is when you said there's the big and then there's the small. Trial and error for me has always been, there's just trial and error because I'm trying to wing it. I'm trying to go on my own because I think I have to, or I'm always telling myself I can't afford something when really you can if you just look at things smartly in business. And the other part I no longer call trial and error. I call that practice.
Okay.
So, and it's refinement. So it's not trial and error when I have the tools, it's refinement. And refinement is play. So trial and error can be play in the concept of you're just trying things, but the energy is different. So I learned the hard way, like many of us do in business and life, just by diving in, thinking I had to do it alone, thinking I couldn't afford a coach or help or things like that. And then you go back and you quantify the amount of time and money you spent throwing noodles at a wall to see what stuck. And he went, holy moly, if I would have just started, I could have saved a whole bunch of grief and a whole bunch of money, if I just would have sat down and looked at a plan to get the tools that I needed. So two really, really powerful takeaways in your journey that I think apply to everybody. And that doesn't matter whether you're trying to create a legacy or you're just trying to get your shoes on to get out the door and live a good life. Those two things will carry you far.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So it sounds like, things kind of presented themselves when they needed to. You also stayed very aware. I loved also in your story that you explained or shared that it wasn't an abandoning of all the things you did. It was taking a look at who you are and your experiences and molding them into how they needed to apply at what chapter you were at. And I think that's one of the biggest markers of success for successful people, is not abandoning everything and saying that you're starting from ground zero because you have a new market, or because that market closed, or that niche went away, or you left corporate to launch a business. I've always looked at my journey as being a fine tuning of the places of where I need to adjust to meet my current market, or what are my current service offerings, but never an abandoning. And I love that while you had this variety of a background, you always found a way to bring that skill set and those pieces together. And that's obviously served you quite well. So, I mean, that's another powerful takeaway for people who are listening is you bring a lot to the table, the collective you. So take a moment to look at what you do and what you have done, and you'll be able to fine tune for the next chapter every single time, no matter what comes at you.
Absolutely.
Those are 3 powerful takeaways you shared with us. So in your journey, was there anything that was really obvious to you, or did it feel like you kind of had to stumble upon answers as you were looking for solutions?
There were some things that were obvious. It was obvious to me that I needed training. And it was obvious that I was going to need to pay for that training. So then the question becomes, how do you pay for it when you're not earning anything? It's the chicken versus the egg.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the money to pay, but you need to pay in order to get the money.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was obvious that I needed training. I found the way to get it. And just as to take that just a little bit further, I don't want to belabor this point, but there comes a point where, I mean, there's a lot of free training out there, but there does come a point where you need to pay somebody, because you can only go so far with free training as well.
Right.
Okay. So that was obvious. So some of the things that I stumbled with, I think the largest part of my stumble was really just redefining for myself who I am, who I am as a professional. I always viewed myself as a successful person. I've always viewed myself as a person who can do anything. I have that American mindset. Yes, we can. Yes, I can. And this was really the first time in my life where I was wondering if I really could, and that shook me to the core.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very difficult thing to face, particularly if you're trying to face it alone.
Right.
And I felt very alone because I was stepping farther and farther away from the field of preclinical safety, the field of veterinary pathology and toxicology. My peers and people who I would have gone to for help and assistance, in that particular work arena, did not necessarily understand, and actually very few of them understood what I was doing and why I was doing it. It's like, even though we're in the midst of this horrible economic downturn and the industry is really struggling, people were not understanding, well, why aren't you trying to get a new job?
Right.
Why aren't you doing that? We know it's hard, but why aren't you doing that, as opposed to trying to make it on your own with this business? And people who are trying to make a business for themselves did not understand why I was grieving what I was perceiving as the loss of the career that I had spent my entire life building. And I didn't know, after a time, I didn't know if I was going to be able to go back. And that was very scary.
Yeah.
So the obstacles there, these are entirely personal. They're entirely all the inner game, as we like to call it. Mindset, spirit. My spirit was pretty well crushed. How do you build that up again if you don't have anybody to talk to about it?
Yeah.
And so and that led me to understand, once again, there are other women out there who are like me, who are successful women. I mean, successful in the sense of society looks at them as successful because they've made it to the C-suite, or their business has just hit 7 figures or whatever. But yet inside, who are they? What are they struggling with? And who do they talk to about that? Because there's a certain persona and a certain mystique that you feel that you have to put forth, to the world. And you can't let the world see all of that vulnerability and all of that uncertainty. And so where do you turn? And that has led me to, again, under the auspices of the Wells International Foundation, it led me to create a second area under women's empowerment, the strategic focus area of women's empowerment, that is to support the successful woman.
Mm,
Precisely for this reason.
right. I think often when we notice that there's a void in our life, one of two things happen. You can either just ignore it and become the ostrich that sticks its head in the sand and says, oh, it's not that bad, even though you're dying on the inside. Or you can say, okay, I can't find what I need, so I'm either going to go create it. And in the creating, two things happen. You either find that somebody already created it, and so it was just you needed to stumble upon it in that regard. Or you found that maybe somebody did create it and it just wasn't still vibing for you, and you just go build what you need. And I think the woman who decides to be an entrepreneur often is the one who is out there being a MacGyver, right? We're connecting things and building things and trying to figure out how to bring it all together.
Yeah.
And the mother of invention, right? So if it doesn't exist, I'm gonna go build it. And then we find out that there's a bunch of other people that are just like us, and we're not as alone as maybe we felt. And it's amazing how we can stumble upon something in hindsight is so obvious, but it happens to all of us at every level, whether you're a beginner or you are a C-suite executive or, you know, a 7 and 8 figure entrepreneur. We all feel it. It's a human aspect. So
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I'd like to know a little bit more, because I know you were talking about your journey, and well, obviously you've done a lot of travel, you know, being in the United States and being in Paris and doing things back and forth. I'm sure you also did a lot of travel and study and research as you dug deeper into Buford Delaney's life and understanding his experiences and his art that's in the Knoxville, Tennessee area, and then also in Paris. So I personally know, just from being part of the WIF family, that there's some things that you've done around that. So for travel and study abroad, and that there is a program that you launched for Classes Duo, which I just thought was so phenomenal, because I'm a child that grew up living all around the world. So I am very connected to the power of being able to, even if it's a short trip, see how the other world or the other parts of the world live, and just understanding that you are a little pea in a big pod. And it's so mind-blowing when that happens. We take for granted what happens when that does. So I would love for you to share a little bit more about the Classes Duo program and the study and travel abroad.
Okay, fabulous. Well, Classes Duo, that's the way it's pronounced in English. It's spelled CLASSES, duo. In French, it's pronounced class, so it would be like the singular. But the way that this evolved was that, so after the success of the Buford Delaney exhibition that I did mount in Paris in 2016, there was just so much positive energy that came out of that exhibition. When I say out of the exhibition, I mean the whole process of putting it together, and then the actual physical time and space where the exhibition took place and the time that it took place. That was February, March 2016. Buford Delaney, he's an indomitable spirit, and he's in me, and I just feel like I sort of radiate him plus my own spirit. And one of the things that came out of that was just totally organically, serendipitously. We had 6 students from the University of Arizona come to Paris to create a digital app, an augmented reality app that worked with the art. So it was a major show, like 45 pieces. These students came over and they created an app that worked with 20 of the 45 pieces. And 5 out of 6 of those students had never traveled abroad before. So this was, this was a mind-blowing experience for them. And it brought about a partnership between WIF and the University of Arizona that continues to this day. And we also brought teachers, K through 12 teachers, through another organization, JREV International. They brought teachers here to understand how to integrate the arts into the teaching of science, math, technology. So that's STEAM. And we had 11 people from Knoxville come to Paris to see this exhibition. None of them, including members of who work for the Knoxville Museum of Art had ever seen so many Buford Delaney paintings in one place before.
Mm.
And they went back to Knoxville and they started a program called Gathering Light, which is to honor Buford Delaney there, because one of the things that they did while here was I took them on a walking tour called Buford Delaney's Montparnasse, which I created in honor of Buford and, in anticipation of the exhibition. And we were successful in getting 2 commemorative plaques placed on buildings in his neighborhood. And the Knoxville people saw those and they were like, we don't have anything for Buford at home.
Aww.
And so, and the Gathering Light project has really taken wing. They now do have a marker for Buford and his brother Joseph, a public marker that you can drive by and see. They're doing all kinds of things, and they have now become the greatest. The KMA, the Knoxville Museum of Art, has become the greatest public holder of Buford Delaney works in the world.
Mm.
All of this, it's all of this snowballing. And so because of all of the things that happened at the 2016 exhibition, my lovely husband, Tom, who is also a board member at WIF, said, okay, Monique, we need to approach the city of Paris and we need to ask them to set up a sister city relationship with Knoxville because of Buford. And this is one of those things where, oh, what a great idea. And then you start out and months go by and nothing happens. And you're just like beating your head. And so finally, and by this time, I'm also getting to the point where, we've put it out there. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. We can't do anything else to make it happen. Someone finally got back to us from the city of Paris and said, well, we cannot do the sister city thing. First of all, we only have one sister city, that's Rome. Chicago's supposed to be a sister city, but that's what Chicago calls it. Paris calls it something else. So just to be clear, right? It's a relationship, but what you call it is different. So, right. Okay, we can't do that. We're trying to get the Olympics, which, by the way, Paris will host the 2024 Olympics. They were thick in the process of that and just didn't have time for little old me. But they said there's a program that the city of Paris runs called Classes Duo. The object is to get French elementary school children, to learn a foreign language. And they do that by connecting with an elementary school in a foreign country. Maybe you can connect a Paris elementary school with a Knoxville elementary school. And that was the beginning of the Paris Knoxville Class Duo program. So that happened, well, I don't remember how long it took for them to say that. And they gave me the name of the contact person. I went to the office. That was in June of 2000. When was it? I think it was June of 2017. And yes, and they expressed a lot of interest. Paris goes on vacation. France goes on vacation in the summer. So I got in just under the wire before the summer break. But they were very excited. And this went forward to say that this is an administrative project. This went forward at lightning speed. And by January 2018, they had identified a school, which serendipitously turned out to be located 5 minutes walk from the address of Buford's last studio. Okay. And just right smack dab in the middle of where he lived. And we started, so then we had to select a Knoxville school. And we're really looking towards working with a public school, because again, after the Knoxville 11, like I like to call them, went back to Knoxville, one of the things that they started was a pilot art program in an elementary school based on Buford's art. And that went really well. They want to expand that to the entire K through 12 system for the public schools. And I wanted to work with that school that had done that pilot program. But unfortunately, public schools are not very flexible. And because the program would have to take place in the morning in Knoxville, because the only time that the French students can do it is in the afternoon, we were unable to work with that school. We were unable to work with any public school. So we found a private school. We found a Montessori school called Nature's Way. And were able to put together a program with Nature's Way Montessori and the Jean Zay Elementary School in Paris. We started video conferencing once to twice a month in January 2018. We did that throughout the spring semester. There were 7 video conferences, and in between, the students created art based on Buford Delaney's life and work. And they learned about his life, and we incorporated a STEAM component into that program, because so much of art is based in science. Paint is a chemical. Color is chemistry and physics. And then, there's all the ways that you can apply paints and colors, and then there's oil and water and, all of that. So it lends itself naturally to STEAM. And so we've done all of that with Classes Duo. And in October of 2018, the Knoxville students and their families came to Paris to visit their French video pals.
I love that.
And it was off the charts. It was so fantastic. I mean, I get choked up still thinking about it. And the art teacher, the Nature's Way art teacher who came, she was always crying. It's like every other thing that we were doing, she's like, "Oh, this is just so beautiful." And
I would have been that person. I would have been crying at every turn.
It was just fantastic. And the parents came, and and they told me just how much this means to their child, and how much it means to their family, and what a fantastic opportunity. And several of them said, if more students at the elementary school level had a chance to make this kind of connection, the world would be such a better place. We wouldn't have all these problems that we have today. And so
it's profoundly true. It's profoundly true.
It really is. And you've got these kids, and so they are learning each other's language. I was blown away when at the end of the spring semester, we asked the students in both schools to just do a very short video, not even 2 minutes, just to answer a couple of questions. What is your favorite memory? What surprised you most about this? What is your favorite art activity? And the Knoxville students every single one of them did their interview in French.
Oh, I remember that. It was so sweet.
I just was floored. My jaw was just open, because it was halting French. Obviously they had to learn it and practice it. It was almost like they memorized it, but they made that effort. They made that effort, and we're going forward. The next thing, we're continuing through the academic year. So we have already 8 to 9 additional conferences, video conferences prepared. All the lessons are prepared. They're all based on Buford's life and art. And we're looking now to bring the French kids to Knoxville.
I love it. I love it. What was interesting is, first of all, it's one of my favorite projects that we've done. It's phenomenal because it has so many amazing layers and beautiful ripples that will probably carry on through these children's lives for the rest of their life. They'll never forget this experience. And they will, beyond a shadow of a doubt, look at the world through a different lens. Because it's no longer the micro level of the little community that they are a part of at home. They understand that they are connected to other children, and that those children are important, and that their connections and their shared history is important. And like you were saying of what the parents said, that is actually how we heal the world. When we understand that it's not just about us, we understand that somebody else's journey is just as important, and then we can make a connection. That's the definition of humanity. And when you have that, you don't want to hurt people. You don't want to be selfish. You don't want to look at just the I view. You look at the we view. And those types of things are so profound when children get to experience them, because they grow up to be adults who remember that. So you've created a beautiful ripple effect. One of the things that you kept saying was that it was serendipitous. And again, I think that lends itself to the fact of you being open. When we do the work to be very clear about what matters to us, I call that my joy factor, my true north, what I'm connecting to,
Mhm.
and I'm open, everything is within arm's reach.
Yeah.
And I don't have to think about the how. I don't have to think about, well, what will it look like? It comes together. There's a lot of work, and there's some, not what we said, so, scraping your knees and broken bones along the way, but you keep going because you're really connected to what your joy factor is, your passion, the thing that you're meant to do. And what's so profound about that is you have consistently remained open to possibilities. And so when messages or ideas like Tom was bringing to you came to you, you were like, okay, that's a little crazy pants, but I think we can make that happen because there's potential there, right?
Yeah.
And so the most powerful thing, I think, in that experience, not only for the children, is you remained open. And that's really important when we decide to take leaps of faith in life, to do something that's big or something that we're passionate about, is to remain open. Because often, crazy as it sounds, within arm's reach, everything is possible. You either have access to the person who can make it happen, or you have access to someone who knows somebody, or through a phone call, you suddenly can get there. It's never really farther than what we think it's going to be. So
Mm-hmm.
remaining open and being true to what lights you up will take you so far in life.
It will.
And that story is a prime example of that, right? You stayed open, all the right pieces came together, and you've created a lasting impact in those children's lives that will carry them forward.
Yeah.
And personally, I can't wait to see more of those little videos. Were just phenomenal. I loved it. I loved it. Well, tying nicely into that, because again, that's working with children. I know you are really passionate about literacy and working with young children, so kindergarten through third grade.
Mm-hmm.
And literacy initiative is a very strong piece of what we do in the Wells focus areas.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious to know, why are you so passionate about that? Why is that something that really lights you up and that you devote a lot of time and energy to?
Well, it's because I was a precocious child. I began reading very early, and I started reading at it still is, the Johnson branch of the Houston Public Library, which is in the neighborhood where my grandparents lived. And I started reading at an early age, and I started reading about animals at an early age, and I started reading about foreign places at an early age. And that formed who I am today. I'm a veterinarian. I'm a veterinarian because I read Dr. Dolittle when I was like 3 or 4 years old. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I read that book and I devoured it. And it was like, okay, I want to be an animal doctor. And really, from the time I read that, I never wanted to be anything else. And I worked my entire life to get that veterinary degree. Okay. And again, I mean, I wasn't even in first grade. I read a little bit older. I started to read, I read Dickens when I was very young. I read A Tale of Two Cities. And I thought to myself, oh, London and Paris, I got to go there. And nobody ever said, and this is important, okay? Nobody ever said, you can't do that. Nobody in my family, traveled. We weren't poor, but we weren't rich either. We were just a very, very low key, sort of average, middle class, low middle class. I don't know, depending. I don't even know, but we were not below the poverty line, but we certainly weren't affluent. Let's just say that.
You were flying to Paris every month as a child.
Right, unheard of.
Right.
And but nobody said, nobody in this family does that. So what are you talking about? There were no physicians in my family, but nobody said, what are you talking about? You can't do that. So my dreams were just fed, and my imagination was allowed to run. And I saw quickly that if I wanted to make those things happen, I've always been a very practical person, like just from the very beginning. So what do I need to do? to get that. I want to be an animal doctor. So what does that mean? And so very early on, I learned what I needed to do, and I set out to do it. And so it was the core of who I am today. It's why I do what I do. It's why I live where I live. And I want to I want to put those resources in front of young people who would not otherwise have them. And I want to plant those seeds, and I want to see those seeds sprout. What happens after the sprouting, there's a lot that can happen, to kill that plant. But I want the seeds, but if there's no seed and there's no sprout, then there's no chance.
Right.
So for me, K through grade 3, this is where we're planting those seeds.
Mm-hmm. It's so true. I love, first of all, that you said you were precocious. I was a precocious child right here too, so I can relate. And I love to read. So I was reading at 3 and could recite things that people are like, wait a minute, how is that possible? Most kids are barely babbling Sesame Street right now, and you're just reciting the names of the 66 books of the Bible in Hebrew, and you got that down. I was like, yep, because my mom and dad made sure that reading was predominant in our household. So, and I also was able to understand that when money was tight in our family, or when we were in a place, because we traveled a lot, that maybe I didn't want to be it. So maybe it was a small town, I felt like I didn't know anybody. Reading allowed me to have an escape. So I could be anything, I could go anywhere, I could learn, and I wouldn't be confined by the zip code I was currently in. And if I didn't like the zip code that I was currently in, I knew it was going to change, either because my parents were going to travel to the next place, or someday I could, right? So I always felt empowered through books. And that's something that I've always loved that you've been passionate about as well, and that you nurture in the focus areas. And that especially when minds are so formidable, in the beginning, reading is mechanics. And so it doesn't seem fun in the beginning, even if the book is exciting. And I continue to talk about this with my daughter as she was learning to read. It was like, baby girl, just hang in there. You'll get to that point when it actually becomes fun. And then when it's fun, it's magic. Reading becomes magic. You can go anywhere, be anything, do anything. And the fact that you said not only did you have this love of reading and that you could imagine a world outside the one you had, your family didn't put limitations on you. Yeah. I think that's so incredibly profound, because a child will carry with them for the rest of their life, no matter how much work they do on themselves, the memory of what they were told is possible when they're small.
Yes.
That the word choice is so important when you talk to a child. And I think letting them know that, yes, it is hard work. So we don't want to give them false ideas that it just pops out of the sky and everything's available to you. It will take effort. And if something's important to you, you can do it. But that anything is possible. And it comes through being able to read. Because if you want to do math, you have to know how to read. If you want to do culinary arts, you have to know how to read first, right? Anything you do starts with reading. So this is one of the ones that I am most passionate about in what you do, because at any given time, there's at least 4 books on my nightstand. My husband as well. We nurture reading with our daughter all the time, because we know the power of it and the magic that comes from it. And I think it's really important that you have understood those aspects from your childhood, because it shows up when I see you do these focus areas. That it's not just having access to literature, it's having access to inspiration and letting these children know that anything is possible. So it's the twofold. It's the psychology, if you will, as well as the literacy, and that the two go hand in hand. And that's actually how we make the world a better place, is you let kids know, here's the books that can open up your opportunities for you, and I believe in you. And that's a powerful effect. So I love that you have this as one of the focus areas. As you well know, it's one of the ones that I light up about the most, and we're out there often doing fundraisers for, because I'm so passionate about. So I love it. I love it. So I'm curious about something about what you have decided to do in launching the nonprofit, because let's be clear, all of us want the world to be a better place, but we don't always want to go do the work that it takes to make it better. So you and I were laughing before we started today. I said it's like the story of the little hen. Everyone wants a piece of that warm, yummy bread, but nobody wants to go do the work to get it, right?
Right.
So I think about that in life and wanting to make the world a better place for my daughter. And as a mother, I want the best for her. And then I also want her to appreciate her experiences that she potentially has more than others. And so always be paying it forward. But it's a big decision to want to take on creating a nonprofit. It's probably a leap that's bigger than most people are willing to take. And I view, obviously, creating a nonprofit as being a legacy aspect. You're creating a legacy that will continue on well past you. When you started to do that, it kind of reminded me of what you do with the L Cubed Alliance. So I'd like to know more about that, because that talks about how we show up in this world and why we do what we do. And that's a big piece for me for women's empowerment, because, you know, women are going to change the world for sure. So tell me a little bit more about that, so I can understand if I'm looking to take leaps to create legacies. Where am I at?
Well, okay. So the L Cubed Alliance, the L Cubed, and a lot of people have trouble with cubed. Okay, this goes back to math. So
You are in class. It's geometry, folks.
so L
Just
Cubed.
imagine an ice cube in your cocktail. You're good. You're good.
The cube is it's like L squared. Everybody knows what the squared is, but they might not know what the cubed is. So it's L to the third power. And
Right.
the 3 L's are lifestyle, legacy, and leading by example. When I told the story earlier about how I felt like I was this successful woman, but I had just really been beaten down and just trying to find my inner balance again, at the same time that I'm trying to find an external balance, and not having anybody, I felt that I didn't have anybody to speak with about that. And I wanted to form something that would support women like me. That's where the L Cubed Alliance comes from. So we are a support group. We're a women's group. We support each other through these kinds of challenges. And it might be a professional challenge, or it might be a personal challenge, or it might be the two combined. You know, how many women are out there who are struggling? Maybe they've just entered the C-suite and they're the only woman.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, they've got to perform, and all eyes are on them, et cetera, et cetera. And who are they really going to talk to amongst their C-suite colleagues? Do they dare go and talk to any of these men? And if in their personal life, they're the first person who's ever done that in their entire family, there's nobody in their family who can relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if they're in their neighborhood and their you know, personal network, there's nobody who's ever done that. Who are they going to talk to about it? So the L Cubed Alliance is formed to deal with this, and this is just one of any number of challenges that a quote unquote successful woman faces. And of course, there's all levels of success, and I don't mean to demean anybody's success. You know, there are many, many, many ways to be successful. What I'm talking about is, at least in the American mindset, you know, success is tied with money and power.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're looking at women who have a great deal of money and or are in a position of power. So this is who the L Cubed Alliance is formed for. All right. Now, at the same time, and when I was just sort of developing the idea, before I even came up with the idea of the alliance per se, I was already writing about successful women entrepreneurs. Because, you know, if you're in the sort of the coaching arena and you're trying to help women build their businesses, the first thing, or not, maybe not the first thing, but you'll hear that most women entrepreneurs will never break the 5-figure mark.
Mm-hmm.
You'll hear that. So they're working, they're slaving, they're doing like 80-hour weeks, and they've got this family and everything, and they'll never make more than 5 figures. So the thing became, got to make 6 figures, got to make 6 figures, right? And then now it's got to make 7, you
Right.
know, or you're not successful.
Right.
Okay. That's BS. Okay. Um, that definition of success is BS. But the organization that I have founded is founded for people who, like it or not, they are what American people would say, you are successful because you're the CEO or the COO or the C whatever O, or your business is bringing in, you know, you're generating over $1 million in revenue or whatever.
Right.
Okay. So, you know, one of the things you learn when you're learning about marketing is that you pick a group and you market to them. It doesn't mean anybody else is any less worthy or anything like that. You just have to focus.
Right.
And you pick where you're going to focus, and you focus.
Right.
All right. So I have done this. Now, the L Cubed Alliance, and I started to say that before I even came up with the idea of the alliance itself, I was already writing about how successful women entrepreneurs give back.
Mm.
I did a whole article series in the Huffington Post called "The Successful Woman Entrepreneur Gives Back."
Okay.
And how do you give back? Whatever it is that you are passionate about, you turn your focus to that. You can give money, you can give time, you know, you can mentor, you can do any number of things. And it doesn't need to be starting a nonprofit.
Right.
It really doesn't. It could be tutoring a kid once a week for an hour, you know. It could be once a month going to the community center in your neighborhood and talking to kids, or, you know, teaching them something. It could be any number of things. It doesn't need to be this humongous, you know, thing that you have to put online and put a name to and all of that. And it's one of the things that we will be talking about during our International Women's Day event that we're going to have in Paris in 2019. We're having a legacy panel on the morning of the second day of the conference. It's a conference/retreat. And we're going to have a panel discussion on personal, financial, and philanthropic legacy. And the person who's going to speak about philanthropic legacy, this is precisely her topic. You don't need to feel like you need to be doing these huge things in order to give back. The smallest thing that you can do, you have no idea what a huge effect that could have, even if it's only for a single person.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that you did two things with that. Number one, you said there was a need, you felt it, and you went out and created it, right? Okay, it needed to be addressed, and you realized that you weren't alone. That's a profound thing that comes from it. We often think, well, nobody's going to have my unique situation. And beyond shadow of a doubt, you go out there and you're like, I found 5 people who have my exact same situation, and I thought mine was really darn unique. How in the world did that happen, right? So there's something that immediately is soothing to the soul to know that you're not alone and that somebody understands your journey. And especially as women, camaraderie is incredibly important to the journey. To be able to have someone that gets you, who appreciates you, it's a safe space to talk, it's a safe space to share. I mean, that is one of the most influential aspects of what I've done in every journey of my life, is to find a circle of people that get me and who want to be in my corner. And interestingly enough, it's often needing to be outside of my circle of friends, because they won't maybe understand my journey. They love me, they support me, they believe in me, they are my biggest advocate. But when I talk about what I'm doing, if it's not the same journey, they may not get it, or they may think that what you're doing is strange or limiting, even if they love you. So it really is important to have your circle of friends for that love and camaraderie, and then to have your professional circle, your circle of success, because they're going to understand your journey in a very different way.
Mm-hmm.
And the advice that is going to be sage unto that experience versus this experience.
Exactly.
And those two are very different. And often people say, well, I told my friend, and I'm like, that's great. However, go over here. So not only did you go out and create what you know you needed to create it, but it also was healing to you in order to do that.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I really heard that's important is we've often been told, especially in Western culture, that legacy is something grand. So if somebody looked at what you did, I consider that to be a grand step. Launching a nonprofit, having all of these focus areas, bringing all of these things to the forefront, all of the events that you've run for fundraising for the focus areas. Those are big things. Not a single one of those was small.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look through the lens of that being the definition of legacy, you can often feel like, I'm tapping out. That's not me. I am not about to do that. I don't have time. It's not my calling. I think a lot of times people also put the blanket on it in saying, okay, well, if that's the definition of legacy, then I don't want a legacy. I remember I recently read somebody saying, well, I don't want legacy. I just want to live a great life now. And it actually made me very sad to read that because it was such a micro view.
Yeah.
For me, legacy means, will I be known as being a person who lived a good life? That's my ripple. Because if somebody can remember how I made them feel versus what I owned and what I wore and what I did, that's a legacy. So for me, it's not a yes or no, black or white. It's not that it's grand or nothing at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then in between, your only option is, I guess it's not for me. That legacy can mean, like you said, are you volunteering once a week? Are you showing your children that volunteering is important? I mean, that's what we just did with my daughter. She just did her own international bake sale because she said, Mommy, I love my STEAM books. I love that I read about Ruby the Riveter because she's talking about engineering and all of that. We have all those books. She said, you keep telling me, Mommy, that there's little girls that don't have books like this, and I want them to have books. And then she started with, well, can you go buy them all books? And I'm like, I'd like to, but Mommy doesn't have all that money in the bank. So he said, well, let's get creative. So then what nurtured and nurtured and nurtured was she wanted to have a bake sale. And I said, well, if we make it an international bake sale, I could put it on Facebook. And then everybody could. And, then she said, well, I don't want the cookies to be wasted. And I said, okay, where would you like them to go? She said, I want them to go to the firemen because they help keep us safe. So her legacy was doing what she felt she could do in that moment that would help as many people. And she's 7. Okay, so the 7-year-old can say that I want to have a ripple effect, and she's not thinking about that's too big for me. She just looked at me and said, you make things happen, Mommy. Help me make this happen. I was like, I'm on it. So it's really profound for me to hear you say that not only do you have someone on your panel that's going to be talking in Paris in 2019 about legacy, but that they're talking about legacy is accessible to us all. And it's almost like reclaiming the word in a different way. Legacy just means being the best version of yourself outside of selfish behavior. So how can I make an impact in somebody else's life? Can I volunteer once a week? Can I donate $5 a month? And that means I just don't get a latte that week, or $20 a month and I don't get 2 lattes that month. Whatever it is, right? Yeah. It's so minute of a change in your behavior to be able to make an impact. And that's the biggest piece that I take away when I listen to conversations like this, is that legacy just means being a good person and doing right by humankind. And it doesn't have to take a lot of effort. But it's so rewarding, and it's actually a ripple effect. And ripple effect is the definition of legacy for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it falls, and this feeds right into the concept of leading by example.
Yes.
Okay. So even though the 3 L's for L cubed are lifestyle, legacy, and leading by example is really the umbrella.
Right.
And legacy and lifestyle you can put beneath that, because just as you said, you have set the example for Ava. And she's like, Mommy, you do that, and I want to do this, and I know you've done things, so I want to do that. So let's do something. That is the perfect example of leading by example. It's the perfect example. and people will gravitate to you. And even if they don't gravitate to you, they will emulate you.
Right.
Sometimes even without knowing it.
Right. Well, they talk about the most profound impact as a leader, if you are an entrepreneur or a boss, if you will, in a corporate setting, is to lead by example. If you want people to be advocates of who you are and what you do, be by their side. Don't manage down, manage up, right? So, I mean, if I'm in it to win it with somebody, I'm going to make sure that they know that I am their number one ally. So when I'm managing teams, that is exactly what I'm doing, is I want them to thrive, and I want the best for them. And I also want them to know what's possible. So if I'm falling down on the job by not leading by example, I will see that in the team. And it's one of those where we just quickly need to be like, all right, I'm going to do an autocorrect on myself. I'm going to turn back around. And then when I show up in the right space, then my teams do as well. And that happens in every aspect. So in your professional aspect, in your personal aspect, and then where you see that you want your life to go. And it's amazing what can happen just by being a good person and taking the time to think about how you want to show up in the world. What we tell our daughter is always, at the end of the day, if you can put your head on your pillow when you go to sleep and know, I was a good person today, and where I made mistakes, or if I hurt someone, I made amends, then you have lived a beautiful life that day.
Yeah.
So putting your head on your pillow and knowing that you were a good person, man, that is the marker of a legacy right there, that you have done your best, and where you made mistakes, you made amends.
Exactly.
That's it.
Exactly. And so many people don't even have the concept of legacy. So it's not something, and I don't mean to say that, I think every day, okay, I'm creating a legacy.
Right.
But to be purposeful about legacy is part of being a good leader.
Yes. Yes.
And so part of what we want to do at the International Women's Day event, which is called The Successful Woman, Lifestyle, Legacy, and Leading by Example, part of what we want to do with this legacy panel is to bring legacy, the concept of legacy, top of mind, and to have everyone in the room and everyone who's watching the live stream to think to themselves, okay, like it or not, I am creating a legacy. What is it? Do I even know? And so since I'm doing it, I may as well be purposeful about it so that it can reflect the best of me.
Right. And you can enjoy the journey. Here's the other thing. When you are purposeful and something is passionate to you and you have a joy factor in it, it's not drudgery. It will be hard work at times when you're creating something, whether it be minor or major. But when you are connected to it, it's enjoyable.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work to do some of the things that I've done, but I enjoyed every minute of it because it lit me up. And when I'm excited, the people around me are excited, and then they get excited, and then it carries forward. So I love that. And it's also one of those things that legacy as a child to me was what rich people did, right? Okay, because I came from a poor family, and we had periods of time where there was no money. So when you heard the word legacy, it was like, oh, that's what little rich people do. They have all this money, and they're philanthropists, and they go create these things, and blah, 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 blah. Okay, so my mind was very narrow. I never even thought that was something that I would ever do. So flash forward to today, I meet you. You and I have been working together for almost 4 years now. And it was like, wow, I'm going to redefine, and I'm going to claim that word because it's not what I had, because life has taught me differently.
Yes.
And so I became a recurring donor with Ava for $25 a month in both focused areas. So $25 a month goes to the arts, and $25 a month goes to literacy. We made that decision just to say, okay, we're going to cut back on some after school snacks at a coffee shop. It was simple change, right? So now we just have after school snacks at home. But I'm not having my snack. I'm still having my life.
Right.
But I get to say, I'm a recurring donor. I'm a philanthropist. I'm making a difference. I'm creating a legacy. It was owning the words by no longer viewing that it was something that was not tangible to me because I had a preconceived notion of what legacy meant.
Yes.
And that philanthropic people were people who donated $10,000 at a table. Yes,
Yeah.
they are, and Godspeed, keep doing that. However, me with my $25 and my little bake sales can 100% be creating a legacy, be philanthropic, and know that it's the right thing to do. And there's not a certain aspect of my life that's lacking now, like, oh, I can't live a great life because I didn't have that $50 this month, right? I'm still eating, my utilities
Yeah.
are still on, my Wi-Fi is still going, and I feel so much richer because I know that I'm able to give back in a way that I can. And for me, that's the definition of a legacy as a mom that I really want her to see.
Yes.
And so it
Yes.
was a beautiful
Yes.
reframe when I went through watching you with the nonprofit to say, wait a minute, I had some wrong definitions there. I can totally do these things. They're within
All
my
right.
power. And it's not only they're within my power, it's my duty. It's my duty.
Okay. You never told me that before.
Yes. Yes. Well,
Oh
there you
my.
go.
Okay. See. Okay. So, all right. I'm not gonna start crying.
Oh, tears are holy water. Let them flow. So I just want to tell you that you have inspired me and my family. And everybody who's watching this, I hope that the biggest powerful takeaways that you have is that at the end of the day, anything that you have that you can share forward is a richer life. And it's beautiful to be able to connect with others and to understand that even at that aspect, you're not alone, right? That when you give, you receive. And that is
Yeah.
always an attribute in every culture, in every aspect of the world. And so whether your calling is to create a nonprofit and take the massive leap like Monique did, or that you're creating a smaller legacy and just being a beautiful person today who cares for others, we encourage you to be purposeful, as Monique said, to be intentional with your behavior and know that this life is meant to be nurtured and be a good person to others. I love it. Well, thank you, Monique. I love chatting with you. And every time I do, I swear I learn something new. You're always like pulling out some extra nuggets. So every time I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Now I've learned even more about you. And I hope that our Wells International Foundation community will learn some wonderful tidbits about you as well and be inspired. So if you enjoyed this video, share it with your community so that they too can learn more about WIF. Take some action in your community. Be purposeful about your behavior. What you do matters. Do not forget that. What you do matters. And we greatly appreciate you. And Monique, I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too, Deb. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Oh, my pleasure. I can't wait to share this with the community.
All right.